All right, so welcome to sort of part 1.5 of saying no and making boundaries. This is specifically uh, geared for, it has a couple of premises or assumptions. First is that BIPOC and gender minority folks are asked to do a lot more things with a lot less reciprocity than other types of folks in academia and other places. And that secondly, if you are building a lab, it does take more time, more effort, and so you will have less time, and you're going to have to bracket out other things. So we're going to talk about some tools and techniques. I'm a strategist, I'm a methodologist. There's a couple of big picture moments, but mostly we're talking about tools here. So here's like the one principle philosophical type thing. No's are always yeses, always, always. So if you think the area that has the most theory and practice around refusal is probably sex. So if you're at a bar and someone says, hey, and you say, nah, you are absolutely saying no, but you are also saying yes. You are saying yes to what you actually like. You are saying yes to what you want to actually get up to that night. You are saying yes to your own ability to choose. So yeah, no's are always yeses. And Indigenous and refusal is a really central method in Indigenous methodologies. I learned a lot of what I know from refusal from people like M. Murphy, from Audra Simpson, from Eve Tuck. And this is me quoting Tuck. Refusal is an affirmation and repair more than a denial, although it is certainly a denial. Refusal is, quote, not just a no, but a redirection to ideas otherwise unacknowledged or unquestioned, or not just ideas, but values, needs, whatever. So we're going to get our no on. The first thing that you have to figure out for really good no's, like I mean like Indigenous refusal theory no's, is what you actually want. And that is really hard because most of us are responding to the things on fire, the things flying at our face, and the things we think our employers need or want from us, none of which necessarily or even commonly align with what we want. And so, and actually, most of the times in our life, that is true. That's not just a work thing, that's also a life thing. So, here is a really great, it's actually a detail of an image from the Indigenous Lands and Data Stewards Lab sort of no flow chart, which I'll get into a little bit more. What I want people to do is to start with step one and just write down, we're not going to share this out, folks, but I want you to write down one thing each from each of the quadrats in the circle. What is one thing, spiritual, emotional, mental, and physical wellness practice? So a good thing that you actually do, not, yeah, that you love and want to center in your life. Just one thing each. Spiritual, broadly defined. The things that feed you. Write them down. Hopefully you have one thing each. Maybe you just have one thing, still counts. Next thing I want you to do is the heart work part. One of your current commitments. It can be work, it doesn't have to be work. So what is the commitment and why is it important that you focus on completing or progressing on that commitment? One commitment and why it's such an important commitment. All right, finish that thought. I see a lot of people looking up into the left. Thank you, those who left your camera on so I can see that and see where we are. So maybe you didn't get very far, which means you have some homework to do because this is like the premise stuff. This is the stuff that you say no for. This is the stuff that other demands cannot disrupt for any length of time, or maybe at all, depends on how strong it is and how central it is. So part of saying no means saying yes to this stuff and saying yes over and over and over again. Maybe that'll help you say no, maybe it won't, but it should help you figure out what to say no to. All right. Once you have, oh yeah, so the other thing you need to know, not just like what sustains you and lets you flourish as a human being with things like a spirit, a soul, emotions, a body, a brain that gets tired, a heart, is that you also need to figure out career-wise what your goals are. So you need to set your boundaries, you need to set your goals before the requests roll in. So do you actually know what you want to achieve professionally in the next 3 years or 5 years? I didn't for a really long time. And that was not a good move on my part. So for instance, if you are, I'm going to do the academic world because that's the world I know best and do the most strategizing in. If you are on the tenure track and you are still an assistant professor, you kind of have to do 2 peer-reviewed articles per year, and you should probably be first author and at least one of those. I would say 1.5 of those. If you are not doing that, your chances of tenure, it gets risky. I'm not saying you won't get it. I'm saying it introduces risk, especially for gender minorities, BIPOC folks, and other folks who are systematically discriminated against in academia. So, figure out what your goals are, write them out. So if you have, this may or may not be different for folks with books. However, most people, by the time they get to tenure, they may or may not have a book contract or a finished book. Book reviews take a long time, longer than articles. So it's a wee bit of a gamble on having a finished book. But if you have the articles, anyway, we can strategize about it if you want to talk about books per articles. Thank you for that in the chat there, Meredith. Also, different disciplines count books differently. In history, you need a book. In geography, maybe you never write one. That's fine. So when you start to look at opportunities that roll into your inbox, you can think about whether or not they move you towards this goal. So for instance, presentations will often not get you towards an article, but maybe they will. Maybe you're presenting on an idea you have for an article, and the audience is perfect for helping you work through it. Let me tell you, the average audience in a presentation is not perfect for helping you work through an article. Former Twitter used to be better at that, but there are different, but yeah. So it's not, so you just do have to make sure that there's a real good match between the offers you pick up and the ones you don't. Going to meetings or events that have people you want to collaborate with is a good use of time to move towards these sorts of things. Right, that kind of stuff. So you always have to evaluate whether the opportunity meets those goals, and that can be an easy no. If you do not know what you want to do in the next few years, here is a really great resource. This resource changed my life, and I'll tell you a story about it in a minute. It's a great story. This is a free download off of a commercial product called Passion Planner. Passion Planner is like for people who have a fetish for paper planners, which I did. They're beautiful, they're sturdy. Their Passion Planner has not just your sort of daily calendar in it or weekly calendar in it for time management and tasks, but also helps you focus, helps with gratitude practices sort of built in. I loved it a lot. But it does have this thing about, well, what do you want to do for your lifetime, 3 years, 3 months, 1 year? And you sit down and do the workbook. But then it says, okay, hotshot, make a freaking plan for that. And this is what changed my life. So my lifetime goal is to disappear into the woods and never be heard of again. Sometimes that's called being a hermit. There are other words for it, but essentially, I want to disappear in the woods and not see humans ever again. And I want to do that as early as possible. I have a great job. That doesn't mean I want to keep working it. And that means retiring when I'm 55. I am recording, Veronica. Thank you for asking. Retiring when I'm 55. Okay, great. And I've wanted to retire when I'm 55, which is the earliest you can retire at my university, for quite some time. And so when I started actually doing the plans for that, I realized a few things that I kind of already knew. Number one, I cannot have a mortgage when I retire, or I won't actually be able to retire. I had a plan for that. I was going to build my own house in the woods where I could disappear more better. And you can actually afford to do that in the province where I live in, which is one of the reasons I live here. But what this planning helped me realize is that for me to get out of debt in time for me to retire when I was 55 by building a house, I needed to start now. I did this about 3 years ago. And the first step in that was learning how to drive. I was 41 when I got my license. And so I just realized, like, I've got to giddy up. And where I am now, literally, is in my half-finished, almost finished built house. You can see I do not quite have a kitchen. That is a temporary sink. This is a plywood desk. There are no internal doors, including in the bathroom, but I do not have a mortgage. I do have some building debt. It is smaller than a mortgage. And I am on my way to retire when I'm 55. Thanks, not exclusively to this planner, but this planner did provide the paradigm shift where I actually realized how soon I had to start doing this stuff. And PS, I'm building this myself. My dad helps sometimes, my neighbors help sometimes, but mostly I watch YouTube videos and I build it. I would say you can do it too, but it's like really hard, just so you know if that's what you want to do. You can do it, it's just really hard. So anyway, I recommend doing this. It makes you cry. Let me put it that way. It makes you broke and cry, but then you have a house at the end. So, all right. So setting boundaries. Once you sort of know what you want and have a plan for getting it, I would also recommend rules of thumbs or principles. So an opportunity might come along that on paper would move you forward. Do you still want it? No. Maybe you get an opportunity to publish first author on a paper, but all the other co-authors are horrible, jerky assholes. Don't take that opportunity. Don't work with jerky assholes might be one of your principles. It is definitely one of mine, and I would say it's one of the most important ones. These are my old rules of thumb. I now only have money and no jerks as mine, but these are my old principles. The opportunity feeds you more than it drains you. That didn't happen very often, especially with talks. Unlike today, I feel pretty good about today. I feel fed as well as sort of serving out things. You will not be consumed or fetishized, which meant not giving talks where you're the only and the lonely Indigenous person, queer, non-binary, fill in the blank. You will learn. This was a big one for me. So because I have a very esoteric specialty, I was at the top of my game. And I was the person in the room who knew most about what I knew about consistently. And I had to work to change that. This group is one of the sort of things I've done to change that, is putting other people, is taking opportunities and making opportunities where I'm no longer the smartest person in the room on my area of expertise or style of ethics. It is reciprocal for me. Building a house, that means almost exclusively cash at this point. And I will take things that I would not normally take for money. I have a price. It is $25,000, just so you're aware. I will teach courses I don't want to teach. I will go places I don't want to go for $25,000. Just putting that out there. American. All right. So figuring what these sort of things are, figuring also what your money thresholds for me, $1,000 unless it's an Indigenous audience, and then I will do it pro bono or for free or for less. But I do not work for peanuts because I know a lot of folks do have the peanuts and they're prioritizing them. So will I. All right, so principles, have some of those. Here's a principle. It's based on research, and it is about being the only and the lonely. There is this white lady who is more than just a white lady. She was also a sociologist named Rosabeth Cantor, and she researched mostly gender, but by the end of the project also race, particularly Black-white relations, where if there is a committee, she looked at committee work in industry and academia. There are less than 16% of the diverse folks, the only result is burnout, harm, and mental health issues for those folks. Basically tokenism. She didn't use the word tokenism, but if there's tokenism, there are no good outcomes, which means if you are joining a committee, because what would they do without you? They won't do well. this is literally what you're signing up for. Think if you were your own best parent, or you were giving advice to your child or your best friend, and they were like, look, I have this data. I know that I will burn out if I do this committee, but, and you're just like, shut down. Here's a Sunday. Don't go. So don't do this to yourself, please. Her research also said that when you reach 16%, the possibility for allyship, coalition, sharing burden, easing the sort of dominant bro culture or whatever's going on, it can exist. It's not guaranteed, but it actually starts to sort of manifest. But what is even better, the committees you should look for are 2, 3, or 50-50 ratios. 2-3, by the way, is more than 50%. It is 66%, for those who aren't in the math world. So these are the places to go. I have been on committees like this, and sometimes the ratio is even higher. This day, for example, and they fill you up. Imagine leaving a committee where you feel better at the end than at the start. They exist, and this is how. Choose this. Don't choose burnout. Why? There's so much committee work. For real, choose this. All right, so there's your data-driven no. All right, understanding your capacity. Most of us have an intuitive understanding that we are over capacity, overburdened, and OMG. But specifically when, where, and how you're over capacity is important to know. And again, some of us have intuition, but at a certain point where you become so effing busy that it's just really intense, having some texture on that can be really important. Or even before then. Maybe let's do before then. Here's an example of capacity mapping and capacity boundaries. This is my schedule from 2 weeks from now. I had to choose 2 weeks from now because it was the place where the most privacy was allowed for my meetings. You will notice, this is in all of my calendars, the end of my day is scheduled in bold. I start work at about 6 or 7 a.m. So this is between an 8 and a 10-hour day, depending when I'm starting. If I have to move this, say, for example, if I'm working with a colleague that I often work with in Hawaii because she is not awake yet, and I have to move the end of my day, I then either shorten the start of my day or shorten the end of my day the next day. I do not give it a bigger container. Your work will fill the container you give it. Stop giving it big containers. In fact, start shrinking your container. I once heard Jeffrey Bowker, you may not know him if you're not an STSer. He's a famous white guy STSer. And he said he only worked 35 hours a week. And that blew my mind because I had been raised in academia to think that that was impossible. And it wasn't. If Jeff Bowker could do it, then certainly someone else could do it too. And it took me a year to make my job, I was a postdoc at the time, to make my postdoc fit in a 40-hour, 35-hour work week. It has not it changed a little bit when I became an assistant professor and I lost my way through the stress of, oh my God, I'm an assistant professor. But I now do not work more than, I always work between 35 to 40 hours a week only. I never work more than 40 hours. And I haven't for 7 years, and I'm extremely successful. I even have this thing. See, this is a Friday. No, this is a Friday. Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. Yeah, this is Friday. And you'll see it's kind of blank. In the summer, I don't schedule things on Friday, not because that's my writing day, but because when I have hit 35 hours, I stop working, which means I usually work for an hour and a half, maybe less, on Fridays. I can't always do that when I'm teaching a course, but I do it in the summer. The other thing you'll see I have scheduled are emails. I email here, I email up here when I first get up, and I email right at the end of the day. And otherwise my emails aren't usually open unless I'm having an email conversation or there's a crisis. I also have lunch hours booked, and I do, unless there's a couple of, this is my campus day. I eat while I work when I'm on campus, but when I work from home, I actually take a lunch break like I'm an employee, which I am, and I read my trashy werewolf romance novels while I eat my lunch. And yeah, there we go. Highly recommend scheduling your day, setting these hardcore boundaries. And if I cannot fill this, people like Veronica and other people in this room who are in my lab have heard me, oh, I don't have time to meet until 4 weeks from now. Oh, I don't have time. I don't have time. I don't have time. And I don't make time. I don't give it a bigger container. I am unavailable. I'm eating my lunch. You're trying to starve me? No, I'm eating my lunch. Also, I need my werewolf porn. Otherwise, I just won't function. All right. And if you need advice on that stuff, I got a list if you want it. All right. Capacity mapping, you should also do it for like a year. So this is another Passion Planner free download. I actually do actually I have it here. I do a hand-drawn map, like schedule. I usually do 6 months at a time. But basically, sorry, weather person, everything's backwards. Due dates, travel, all the sort of stuff I put in here. And if someone wants me to do something, say in this zone, and this zone is already really packed, I have to say no in a way that I can't always tell when I look at my calendar. So for instance, when I put a deadline, I'll also read out the 3 days before it or 4 days before it, depending on the type. If it's a grant, the 2 weeks before it. And that sort of tells me about my capacity and when I can't take anything out. I always block out March. I do not take speaking engagements in March. March is the season of no sun on the island of Newfoundland. It is also the season of burnout from 2 consecutive semesters where we only have 1 week of break between the 2 semesters during like Christmas time, winter time. And so we have really long summers, really short winter breaks. It's worth it, but March, you are crunchy. And every March, I realized I want to quit my job. And it's actually the weather and the time of year. It's not just my job. And so I block that out now too in my year. So these are different ways to map your capacity to help you say no when you know you're going to be in the red at a certain area or you don't have a container big enough for it. There are other techniques. Now you have to say yes or no. The resource bundle I'm going to send everyone, and that is also on the IndigeLab and Clear websites 1 week after the date of this exact recording, has a bunch of templates for saying no. We saw some of them yesterday. I've put some more in. Lydia provided some really great sort of ideas, which me and ChatGDP wrote up. Lydia, FYI, will be coming to you for that, for consent to share those. But in the meantime, again, the amazing folks at the Indigenous Land and Data Stewards Lab have written us a flowchart. How handy. I love flowcharts. And let me tell you, as I wrote this very presentation, I have an offer that is a very important offer to consider. It's about dealing with one of the major polluting industries on my homelands. I don't actually work on my homelands. And I was like, oh my God, this is very important. Question number 1, are you excited about this new request or opportunity? You know what? I am not. I should do it. I do not want to do it. Thank you, spreadsheet or flowchart, for already helping me decide. If you do, anyway, it takes you through this sort of stuff. Okay, but what is it going to be reciprocal? Here's your principles. No, it doesn't meet my principles. Maybe it does. Okay, can you actually make room for this? Right? When you think of, so you go back to your charty McCharts. Can you swing it? Yes, I can. All right, sure. But given that your schedule looks like this, notice the spare time I have is 15 minutes before I meet with Veronica. Given that, what are you actually going to have to move out of the way? Is it one of these things? No, you are not allowed to move one of these things. That is what these are. They are unmovable, life-sustaining objects. Do not remove your life-sustaining objects, especially not for your employer. All right. So if you can move some of those things, because who has spare time? Raise your hand if you have spare time. You do not. You need to move things. What are you going to give up? Right? If you can do that, great. Take the opportunity. So this is a really great flow chart. I especially like this end where it's like, well, that's all great, but for real, what are you giving up, biscuit? Oh yeah. And maybe you can give up a little bit of class prep for 1 week because it's reading week. Maybe you can give up something else because your kid's at another parent's that day. Maybe you can give some, like maybe you can accommodate that. Maybe you can do this, but maybe not. And it's an important thing to know. There are other resources. I would like to talk about ones that you all have. As soon as I'm done here, this is the last slide. One of the things that I worship Dr. Dominique David Chavez over is her auto reply, which is basically like, I'm busy doing high priority stuff. I bet your email isn't one of them. I'm probably not going to answer it. Love you. Bye. There are other emails like that, that auto replies that I've seen, and they're not when she's on leave. They're like, it's on all the time. There's also the idea of using forms for requests. So especially if you publish a book and are Indigenous, or even if, like people like Lydia, actually this already applies to, even though she hasn't written a book yet and may never. Lots and lots of requests for speaking and chats and expertise using a form, especially a form that asks like, what's your reciprocity? PS, my going rate is $1,000 for a presentation. Asking, what is the audience? PS, I prioritize Indigenous audiences. What it like actually getting those upfront in the requests is really good. Dr. Dominique David Chavez also requires people to do like mandatory readings before filling out the collaboration form, which I think is really great. It's a reading about like, before you approach an Indigenous person, 10 things to consider by Jesse Pop in the conversation. And I'll share that resource as well in the bundle. But anyway, using forms. And when someone fills in the form, for us, it goes to a Google Sheet, not my email. So it's not like real time in my face. I'll go check it later. There's a thing called a no committee. I had this for a while, but I get 2 or 3 requests a day for things, and it no longer was polite to the rest of my no committee. But basically, when you get an opportunity, you swing it by them. And earlier, when I was talking about, would you recommend to your best friend or lovely colleague to do this? No, you would not. This is what the no committee helps you do. Hey guys, there's this committee, and even though I would be the only gender minority and person of color on it, I think they're just not going to be good for students. They're just going to make bad decisions if I'm not there. And I know that's going to result in burnout, harm, and mental health issues. Should I be on it? Your friends, your no committee will be like, no, or should be say no. And sometimes just going through having to talk to people that you know care about you about these opportunities helps you just decide before you even email them. Calendly, the reason Calendly stresses me out, and I actually can't use it very well because I don't have wiggle room in my schedule. But what Calendly does accomplish is if people ask, especially students ask you for a lot of meetings, it says, these are the only places where I have meetings. And yes, you might be booking a month out. It also lets you put in only half-hour meetings or something like that. And it also saves you the job of like emailing back and forth with your availability. It's mostly for one-on-one meetings. It doesn't really replace Doodle. But I do know a lot of people who use this, and it keeps the meetings in the container, and it frees them up from some of the back and forth emails. And then, like I mentioned, the bundle is going to have a lot of templates for saying no. I have a text file called Life that is always open in the cloud that's on all my computers. And it's the templates for saying thanks, but no. Thanks for no for events, offers, speaking, etc. Thanks, but no for students who are asking to join my lab. And thanks, but no for people who send me huge compliments about the book, which is great. And then Barry, PS, I want to collaborate with you in that request. Those are my three main templates, and they're all in the bundle. All right. Those are the master things. Those are the master things. Those are the things I have for you. I think it would be great to do. You're allowed to, by the way, Meredith in the chat, you are allowed to love my book, and you are allowed to email me about it, and I will reply. If, however, you use it to grease the wheels of then asking me a favor, I have a great auto reply that's like, thanks so much for liking my work. I really appreciate it. I have left the rest of your request unanswered. Bye. All right. I'm going to pause the recording for a minute. No, I'm going to stop the recording.